I'll introduce Kaitlyn Parkins from American Bird Conservancy, who's going to talk about Make Every Collision Count.
All right, thanks so much, Tim.
Sure.
I am here to talk about tools, programs, opportunities to make our data collection better. Yell at me if you can't see my screen or if this doesn't look good to y'all. So thanks to decades of volunteer collision monitoring, primarily volunteer monitoring, researchers have been able to answer a lot of questions, a lot of big scientific questions about bird window collisions in North America. We've got national estimates, we've got known risk factors, we have strong evidence for effective mitigation strategies. And I think Simon's presentation really showed how powerful monitoring data can be for answering these really big questions about collisions. And there are still data gaps and questions that need exploring, but in general, I think our field is really starting to move from needing to prove to people that collisions is an issue generally, and now, as Simon showed, we can actually tie them to the decline of birds in North America, to preventing this problem, addressing this problem. So while big picture science on collisions is really large scale, those important actions are taking place at local scales. And local data collection, whether it's structured or informal, is so valuable because it translates that broad science into site-specific actions. And honestly, in many cases, we don't need more data to justify action, but it can help make the problem visible to decision makers. It can help connect people emotionally to this issue, and it can pinpoint the highest impact opportunities for action and limited resources, so where we direct our time and effort, and importantly, our money. I wanted to highlight just in this list, measuring retrofit effectiveness. I think this has come up a couple times, that's an area where we really need more monitoring and local data, and it's really critical. I was going to go through a couple of examples of local data being used in interesting ways. I do have to cut that for time because I kept running over when practicing, but I'm happy to go back to those and discuss them later, either during the Q&A or if you can join us in our breakout session. Importantly, though, I do want to mention that you don't always need a massive data set to make these changes. I think there's this idea that more data is always necessary. If we have more data, we can get this policy in place. But there are places with massive amounts of data, potentially more than any other city, that struggle to get bird-friendly building ordinances in place, and other places that have passed these ordinances that never had any formal collision monitoring. So I just don't want the takeaway here to be that you need data to act. But in some cases, data can really push a skeptic over the line, and a handful of credible records paired with a compelling story, like Melissa's story that she told earlier, can really move decision makers. So the question becomes, how can we collect and report these data effectively, and how can we strive to make our data useful for big scientific analyses like Simon just shared, while also recognizing the usefulness of local efforts and our impacts there? So there's no single right way to collect data. It depends on what you want to do with it. Incidental reports are often unplanned. Someone spots a bird, they submit a record, and these can be incredibly useful for filling gaps, for spotting emerging patterns, for demonstrating that the problem exists. While systematic surveys follow a set protocol, this is the same route frequency, the same time of day, it allows for comparisons across time and across sites, and allows for more in-depth and sophisticated scientific analyses. I think the key is that both of these approaches are valid and complementary of one another. One is building breadth, and the other one is building depth. So for those of you who are trying to decide what type of data collection is right for your project, it's important to match your method to your goals and to work within your capacity. But you also might want to consider what your data could be used for in the future. Maybe a new question arises that no one has thought to look at before, and maybe your data collected years ago is valuable in contributing to that analysis. So we want to always strive for the highest quality data you can realistically collect and realistically manage. Some questions You can ask yourself in the beginning, or here, I will say, if you ask yourself these questions early, you can plan your data collection, including the tools you're going to use, so that it will be easy to use and manipulate and analyze your data down the line. And I have burned myself by not asking these questions and not doing this planning in the past. And so I have learned from experience. So looking at your purpose, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to document a problem, or maybe you're just trying to engage the public? Who is going to use these data? Be realistic about your capacity. I keep saying this, but I think Catherine really emphasized like how much time and training and consistency and effort it can take to collect formal monitoring data. And that might not be feasible for everyone, and that's okay. And finally, do you need these data to be comparable over time and across locations? If not, maybe a simpler approach could work for you. And finally, you want to make sure that your data isn't just going to live in isolation on a hard drive somewhere. So make a plan for how you're going to share it and communicate it so it's useful for others down the line. There are so many options for data collection and storage now. It went from paper data sheets and filing cabinets to many different tools and platforms are available, from these incidental collision monitoring tools, Esri tools. Some groups have even designed their own custom apps that they use to get their volunteers to collect data. And I'm going to go over quickly just some of the most commonly used options. For incidental collisions, there are a couple free public-facing platforms available. All of them collect the location, the species, the cause of death. They allow for photo upload to help with identification. All of the entries are geolocated, and these are all really geared towards easy mobile data entry for the average person. However, they do not collect zeros, so generally you're not reporting no birds. They also don't collect survey effort. So these are really primarily good for that incidental data collection. And just a couple things about each of them if you're, considering using one of these for your organization or a project. The Global Bird Collision Mapper is a collisions-focused reporting platform. It's a project of FLAP in Canada. It's a free public-facing open access data platform. It does not require participants to make an account, but they can if they want to. Users and organizations can register a full team, and there is a mobile app via Survey123 because it's built on the Esri platform. You can submit up to 3 photos. Participants and team coordinators can edit observations. You can report 0 birds, but as of now, there is no survey effort field. And so again, it's not useful for storing your formal survey data in a per building way. dBird is another option. It's a project of New York City Bird Alliance and Birds Connect Seattle. It's really excellent for quick, incidental, opportunistic reports and requires minimal training. That's sort of what it was designed for originally, was to make it easy for people who are maybe not quite so engaged in this topic, or who maybe don't care that much about birds, but happen to find a bird and they wanted to submit that report. Again, it's free, it's public facing. The data is not available to my knowledge for direct download by anyone, but anyone can request the data from dBird. And it does not require participants to make an account, so there's no barrier to reporting caused by that. Users and organizations can create projects based on geographic boundaries, and the project coordinators can edit and download all the project data. Also, projects each have an individual map URL tool. So essentially, you can embed your dBird map directly in your website. So you don't have to download your data and like make a static map and upload it to your website. I just think this is a really cool little feature for organizations that maybe, want people to be able to engage with collisions on their site. Finally, there's iNaturalist. A lot of groups use iNaturalist. It's a free online platform for sharing biodiversity observations across all taxonomic groups and primarily live ones. So if this is not focused just on collisions. Oh, I meant to say that dBird also has the option of putting in other causes of death, like entanglement or cat attack, not just collisions. I meant to add that in. So for iNaturalist, yeah, you can put live birds in and dead birds in. And a lot of people have created projects to which participants can submit data, like the Newark Window Collision Monitoring Project I have a picture of here. Public facing, open access. It does require an account to submit data, which I find can be a barrier for some people who just aren't invested. They don't want to download an app. They don't want to give their email away. They just want to report that bird. It could potentially be a barrier. Um, the really neat thing about iNaturalist is that identifications are crowdsourced, which means that you can mark an observation as unknown, and other people who use iNaturalist can suggest identifications. And it really makes it, it takes a lot of the effort off of the program manager if you have these crowdsourced identifications. You can add project-specific data fields like survey effort, but because of the way data is stored on the back end, I find that it takes a lot of manipulation. It's a little bit difficult to use that field. You also can't submit zeros, which are really critical for formal surveys. All right. Formal surveys. This is when you're always recording zeros when birds are not found. This is when you are recording survey effort, as in, how long and how you're looking and how many people and how much distance is traveled. And you want to be able to report out birds per survey versus just number of birds found. Because if you look once and you find 50 birds, that's very different than looking 100 times and finding 50 birds. So the tools to collect data vary, typically very similar formatting on the back end. There's all of these different options, paper data sheets, Esri tools, open access tools. If you're curious about any of these specifically, I'm not going to go over them one by one, but I can connect you with a group that is using them that you could learn from. And once data are collected, they're often stored in local spreadsheets and databases, typically in the same way where you've got a spreadsheet where volunteers are putting in their data per building or per facade, and the number of birds found here. This is great if you want to compare, how many birds are killed on Sycamore Street versus how many birds are killed on Oak Street. And then a separate spreadsheet where you've got individual records of each bird and each species of bird found. And if you keep these separated, it allows some really interesting data manipulation. And I know that at least in some cases, these are kept in relational databases that kind of tie each bird to the survey in the other sheet. Unfortunately, there is no online publicly available platform for reporting and storing formal collision surveys with all the necessary associated metadata. And I think this is something I'd like to talk about more in the breakout room, whether there's a role for BCPA in sort of developing or, helping collate some of these data from formal surveys because there isn't anything available. However, this is us all improving our data quality. Even a few extra details can make a big difference. Simon went over these things a bit. If you're collecting data, these fields are essential to ensure consistency and comparability in use. Date, time, coordinates, specific facades, or the height on the building, if you can determine what height the bird collided with. For incidental reports, include as much of this information as you can. Even if you don't have survey time or effort, maybe you have multiple photos that you can provide. Using consistent taxonomic systems is going to be really important so that people like Simon don't have to write 35,000 lines of code in order to line these things up. Again, survey effort, notes on context, all of these things are going to make it so that even if you don't need that information right now, someone might be able to use that information down the line when answering a different question. Of course, not everyone can do this all the time, but the goal is to strive for this completeness wherever it's possible while not letting perfection prevent participation. When you are analyzing data, once again, I'm a broken record, reporting birds per survey is a really great way to look at differences over time and before and after retrofits. Of course, then you want to connect your data to action, identify your high-risk buildings, evaluate your retrofits, even identifying invested constituents. When I was managing dBird, I was able to look at who was reporting a lot and reach out to those people and engage them in advocacy for collisions in New York City. Using visuals is super important, maps, charts, summaries, but I think sometimes a lot of us are scientists and we like want to share all the data all the time, but sometimes a really simple infographic or just the main story is important. And I really love this photo. I saw this years and years ago when I first started, and this is a compelling story that can motivate change, and it's two birds. And I thank Ann Lewis from City Wildlife for letting me share this, but it's pictures like this and stories like this that have an impact on people, not just the raw data. Oops, sorry. And so finally, if you can make use of the public databases, but I also just want to point out that something that Simon brought to my attention was that full data sets can be published. And so there are data journals. He actually sent me a full list and information about data journals. So if anyone is interested in exploring the possibility of publishing your data sets so you get acknowledgement and you retain some level of credit for it while also making it available to scientists, please reach out. And with that, here are my takeaways. I'll let you look at them yourself. Let's make every single collision count. Thanks, y'all.